Hey everyone, it's Brooke. Welcome back to my channel. What a week, but we are back to talk about my weekend books, the stuff I have just finished, the stuff I'm currently reading, and the new books coming into my life this past week. I want to do a couple of follow-up mentions of some books I finished after talking about them being about halfway through last week. The first one is The Honeymooners by Christina Lauren. I did really end up liking that book. I do think the end was rushed and that the sort of big falling out they have, which happens typically in a romance novel, I don't think it was given enough attention. The reconciliation, I think he was forgiven too easily. I wish there had been about 30 to 50 more pages of that being resolved in a better way. So I do agree with people about that thing. And honestly, I think that whole storyline could just been ejected from the novel. I don't know, I just don't think it was necessary. It felt a little bit, it was sort of dark for this book that I felt was a little not so dark. Anyway, so it just felt weird and I would have taken out the whole storyline. But since 3/4 of this book was just so charming to me, it still got 4 stars. And I rarely rate romance that high, so it just really worked for me personally. I also wanted to mention Mostly Dead Things by Kristen Arnett. There was a New Yorker article today on sort of taxidermy and literature, and her book was featured and they wrote really beautifully about it. So I highly recommend checking out that article if you have read the book or if you are interested in reading the book. It does give, you can't really spoil anything in a lit fic novel, and it doesn't give away some of the bigger plot points, but it does talk a lot about the characters, I think. I really loved the book. It was, because it wasn't perfect and it definitely has sort of a mushy middle, I couldn't give it a 5-star. It wasn't a 5-star book for me, but it was a solid, solidly, I can't talk, solidly 3.5 to 4-star book. It had some really fantastic moments, some really great scenes, and I think it's going to end up being 4 stars because I keep thinking about those characters so much. I think the ending of it was so great. It was just kind of a quiet novel where you crawl inside of a family that's grieving and see what that looks like. And I enjoyed it. So I'm going to become a champion for Mostly Dead Things. Like the critics, because the critics have really loved it. I think the audience, not so much. Well, give and take. Some people not so much. So that's my follow-up. I will now talk about the last book I read, which was a book I was listening to on audio. It was a very quick audio. It was a very short book by probably someone I could consider now one of my favorite kind of weird lit authors, and that is Helen Phillips, and this is The Need. This is her newest, it's very short. It's a 6-hour audiobook. So I flew through it. I was enjoying it so much, but there's it's really weird that I would often come home and flip back through some pages and reread some scenes because it's very psychological. And I think so the ratings aren't great on Goodreads, and I think that makes sense. I think this is definitely a book for a very particular audience. That audience happens to include me. This was 4.5 stars right off the bat, and it is sort of a feat when an author can write a book that is very, very deeply centered around motherhood, a topic I really don't feel any connection to and typically don't like to read motherhood novels, but for her to be able to write this and I just really connect and love it so much, including the parts about motherhood. This is really good. I don't even know how to talk about this book, and I feel like it's one that you just don't need to know anything about if you're just down for a wild ride. I highly recommend this. I think what I will say is I agree with some other people when they say it's definitely been marketed wrong. I think most of the negative reviews I've seen on Goodreads have focused around the fact that this isn't really a thriller, and somehow it kind of got marketed that way. I mean, it's a thriller in the way that I would really like thrillers to be thrillers, but I think for people very familiar with the genre who like look for certain things in the genre, this was probably super unsatisfying to them, and I get that. But I think that's the marketing's fault, not the book's fault. I think what this book sets out to do, what Helen Phillips anyways, what she sets out to do, she does quite well. This is far more like philosophically psychological, with twists and turns. There's not a whole lot of hard answers. The ending, it would probably not satisfy very many people. It's a book that I could probably sit down with someone in like a book club or something and talk about this for hours. Yeah, it's gonna stay with me, just like The Beautiful Bureaucrat has stayed with me. Like, I love that book so much, and I read a lot of articles, critical articles around this book, kind of trying to get into Helen Phillips's mindset a little bit more, just wanting to know more about like where this came from out of her. And in one of the articles, they talk about how The Beautiful Bureaucrat was like her writing about being in your 20s, and this is more of a like the next step, you know, with like having kids and dealing with like marriage and sort of the dualities of motherhood, and just viewing yourself as a parent and how that changes you, and you know, just what that looks like in like reality. And I think it's just good. And I will warn you though, to the children in here, especially the, like, I think she's a 4-year-old little girl. She's a 4-year-old little girl. You know, in a lot of books, you get kids that speak way beyond their age. This is not that. She is 4 years old. She speaks like a four-year-old. I've been around a lot of 4-year-olds in my life, and this is very accurate to how they talk. Helen Phillips' mother herself, she would know. And it can be annoying as fuck. And I think it's meant to be. And this book, another thing people have really sort of latched onto, which is poor turn of phrase, is the constant discussion of lactation. It is something that is probably mentioned once a page or once every other page, but I think that's done very purposefully. And so it didn't bother me, because I feel like people are like, oh, did she just not notice she kept writing about lactation? Like, she knows what she's doing. She's doing that on purpose. And so that might bother you too. I just wanted to throw it out there. It didn't bother me. I sort of have a lot of thoughts about why she did that. Yeah, it's just, I could talk about this deeply for a very long time, but I would only want to do that with people who have read the book. So there you go. I recommend it. If you sort of have my taste in weird stuff, maybe give it a go. And you know what I also learned today from the New Yorker article about Mostly Dead Things is that Mostly Dead Things is the very first book that Tin House has ever had make the New York Times bestseller list, which I think is really super fun. And I'm so happy for Kristen Arnett and like weird little indie lit fic. So I'm happy for that. What am I currently reading? So I am still currently reading Something Rich and Strange by Ron Rash. I do just want to mention that I still think these stories struggle from their maleness and their lack of well fleshed out female characters. There have been a couple of stories since my last discussion of this that have featured women. Still don't think it's being done super well, but I do like these stories. So it's just one of those things where it's just going to be a problematic enjoyment book or something. I don't know, but I do keep reading these stories. So I think he does have quite a talent with a short story. I never feel like it's a chore to read these. I mean, they can be like 20 plus pages and I just fly through these. I mean, like, it's just so easy to sit down and read one of these a day. I have been often tempted to keep reading, but I'm sticking to the one a day for now. So that's that update. And then I started 2 books that I am both about 60, 70 pages into, and I'm loving both of them. it's early days. So I can't, you know, who knows? We'll see how it turns out by the time I finish reading them. But the first one is it's Inland Potato Brecht. I don't have words. It's so nice to be back in one of her novels. I don't technically know what this is about. I'm going in pretty much completely blind. It is centered in the Arizona territory, I think, yeah, of 1893. We're kind of focused on a family, specifically the matriarch of this family, or the mother, Nora, who is sort of in charge right now because her husband has gone off to try to find water. They're in a major drought. Her sons have ridden off somewhere, and so she's kind of stuck at home right now with her youngest son, her mother-in-law, and their ward, which is, I think, like her husband's cousin or something. I forget exactly how they're related, but a younger woman. She's probably an older teen. I don't know how old she is. She's Josie, and she can speak with the dead. So there's a ghost element to this, and so that's really fun, and I'm just really enjoying it. There's also like really short chapters, which always surprises me in something that's kind of considered literary, when there's just those kind of short, punchy chapters, and I'm really enjoying it. Like I said, like ghosts in the American West in 1893 was so far a lot of female characters who I mean, you know, one is doing seances, one is trying to take care of her family and figure out like where the menfolk went and how she's going to get water, and there's some weird goings on. Her son thinks there's some kind of beast out in the desert. There's lots of discussion about like money and politics, because there's like this big cattle rancher who's like trying to buy up all the land. There's all these kinds of things going on. It's like simple and complex all at the same time. And so 60 pages in, this is still getting my full recommendation so far. And then sort of in a very different direction, I haven't read a YA book in a while. So I picked one up that I have been really dying to read, probably 95% because of the cover, and that is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I have heard that this is strange, and that it was, and I agree with this, kind of like a mashup of Annihilation and Lord of the Flies, and truly, that's what it feels like so far. It also feels very cinematic, but it's about this all-girls school off the coast of Maine on this island, and they're in lockdown quarantine because it's called the tox, I think, this sickness that has taken over their bodies. And it's affecting not just the girls, it's affecting like the older teachers, like men, women, the animals, just life in general. And it starts to like, I mean, it's basically killing you. It's like ripping apart your body, but also changing your body. Like some of the girls, like things are growing inside of them, like, or their like skin is turning silver. It's almost like they have scales. Some of them have gills. Some of them just have big gashes. Like it manifests itself differently in everyone, and it's just weird. And then like they're like not just trying to survive this illness that kind of is cyclical, but also just trying to survive because the supplies that they're given are not a lot, and so there's not a lot of food. And the girls literally like fight over it, like not necessarily to the death, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone eventually dies. Yeah, and so far this is kind of what's been going on, just kind of laying the territory, like building the world, and I've been really, really interested in it. There's a kind of a threesome friendship / our main character Hetty is attracted to girls, so she's having some feelings about some of the girls in her life, but it's basically kind of centered on this threesome, and I think one of them is going to go missing eventually, but I haven't gotten there yet. So I've also heard this takes a nosedive in the second half, so we'll see. Yeah, but I have been enjoying it quite immensely. I said a lot of times in this video. I wanted to talk about a book that I need your opinion on. So I have been culling a lot lately. I always want to cull towards the end of the year as I start to think about all the new 2020 books that are coming out and making my 2020 list, which I've already started. So I'm trying to get rid of some of the stuff, getting rid is not the right word. Just wanting to donate some of the books I don't think I'm going to read to a worthwhile place. So I have been doing that, and I just today I think pulled 40 off the shelf, which feels good. Feels good, feels light, feels airy. But there's one that I'm waffling on, and I have put it on the donate pile and taken it off a couple of times, and I just don't know. I don't know. And like on Goodreads, it does not have high ratings, but some people I really trust really liked it. And I think some of the reasons it has low ratings on Goodreads is because it mimics too closely kind of the messed up politics of our actual world, and people just don't want to, you know, take that into their reading life as well as like real life. And I get that, but I think I will like this, but I just need your opinion. And that is Infomocracy by Malka Older, and this is the first in I think a trilogy. I think they're all out. It's got a really pretty shiny cover. It's like a big data, big ideas, techno-analytical, demi-global. I'm sorry, I can't read. Post everything political thriller. That's a lot of words. Yeah, so it's post Cyberpunk. Let me know what you think about this, if you've heard of it, if you've read it. I need help. And then finally, the only new book I got a couple of like collection books because I'm back to collecting my pretty classic editions, and I got a couple of Harry Potter things, but the only like new book that's in my house that I have still to read is Kitchens of the Great Midwest by J. Ryan Stradle. I don't, bless me and my terribleness. Look how little, it's such a little floppy penguin paperback. It's cute. So this came out in hardcover last year, and I think it was last year. It could have been the year before. He has a new book out, The Lager Queen of something. Anyway, recently I have come across so many people on the internet who are evangelical about this little book, to the point where I was convinced to give it a try. I think it's going to read really easily. It's only 300 pages. So maybe I'll just keep it up here in the bedroom, throw it on my stack of soon-to-be-reads right there, and pick it up soon. I think that's what I'll do. So yeah, that's my weekend reading. So let me know down below if you're reading anything you're really enjoying. Have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? And I will see you guys next week. Bye.